Hello and welcome once again to FAIRtax Power Radio. I'm Bob Paxton.
And I'm Ron Molero.
And we are
the FAIRtax Guys.
And I tell you what, if you did not hear last week's episode, our interview with Randy Fisher, you need to go back and listen to that because we're going to expound upon that here shortly after we tell you how to get in touch with us, thefairtaxguys@gmail.com. And like us on our Facebook page and look out for our Facebook Live. We'll be doing another one here in early February. We'll figure out the exact date and put that out here shortly. But we have got to expand on what Randy said last week.
Yeah, Randy gave a great interview, and give credit to Bob. You'll notice that Bob does all the interviews because he knows how to do it, and I don't. So he's got the radio experience, and I don't. Okay,
well, we've been explaining here on FAIRtax Power Radio the benefits of what the fair tax is going to mean for the individual, like bring home your entire paycheck, no more federal withholding, no more federal payroll taxes. You get the prebate on top of that. It's much simpler. You never file another income tax return. Yeah. April 15th is just another lovely spring day. We can go on forever. But Randy was hitting on the one thing that I think we as fair tax volunteers really need to get on to our politicians about, because this is the issue that's going to get their attention. The guys up there in Washington, D.C. that love to take your money from you and spend it, when you point out to them that the current income tax system leaves literally billions of dollars on the table that they'd otherwise could have to spend.
That's right.
That will get their attention. The fraud and evasion that Randy talked about is just more rampant than the average Joe Blow really wants to understand and realize. And you have got a huge pile of research over there, so I'm just going to sit back, relax, take a snooze here, and let you go to work on that stuff. But I will jump in if you say something profound.
Yeah. First off, tax avoidance is legal. Tax avoidance is when you're using the tax code properly to reduce your tax liability. By taking a deduction, a credit, something like that. That's perfectly legal. And
it's dumb not to.
yeah, it'd be foolish not to. And that's, I use software when I do my taxes. Being retired, my tax situation has gotten a lot simpler. But still,
But it guides you through there and says, let's make sure you're getting all the deductions and you're getting all the exemptions that you're entitled to. It asks you a bunch of questions, and
exactly.
So that's perfectly legal. Yeah. And that's one of the reasons why the tax code is so complicated, because it is full of those little loopholes and deductions that are put in there at the behest of lobbyists usually.
Yeah.
And now nobody can understand it.
Yeah, either you use software or you have to hire a Philadelphia lawyer to get all the proper and legal deductions and credits and so forth for you.
And hope he understands the tax code. Remember Money Magazine's thing when they asked the hypothetical family, 50 tax preparers, what this hypothetical family owed in income taxes, and out of the 50 tax preparers, they got 49 different answers.
Yeah.
That was in the mid-'80s when the tax code was nowhere near as complex and complicated as it is now.
Oh, it's much worse now.
So let's go ahead with the fraud and evasion angle. You got some really good stuff over there.
Okay, the evasion is illegal. That's when you're evading your proper tax bill, all right? When you're trying to get out of either you're underreporting income or you're overreporting deductions illegally. So avoidance, we advise, use the law, as much of the law, to reduce your tax bill, but don't participate in evasion. Now, this is from efile.com, and they didn't have a date on their website. So tax evasion has long been a problem for the IRS. Tax cheats cost both the federal and state governments a significant share of tax revenue every year. Yeah, because we do have a number of states that have a state income tax as well as your federal income tax.
Yeah, luckily in Florida, we're not one of them.
That's
we
right.
We don't have to deal with that.
Yeah, and we talked about that before. The states that don't have an income tax, their economies are doing quite a bit better than the states with the highest income tax.
Now, isn't it kind of telling that high-income folks like Sean Hannity, Rush Limbaugh, Glenn Beck, all of them, well, Hannity's still there. The other two have moved out of New York.
Yeah.
Limbaugh to Florida, Beck to Texas, and Hannity is supposedly coming to Florida as well. So rich folks that the folks love, that the tax system loves to soak, are tired of getting wet, and they're leaving.
Yeah, and even in my golf magazine that I picked up the other day, was delivered to my house, it's got an article, The Facts on Tax, and they're talking about why pro players are moving to places like Texas and Florida. One, because they're warm and they can play Texas all. Yeah, They can play golf all year long.
There you go.
2, they don't have a state income tax.
Yes, well, that's
Go
legal,
figure.
That's legal avoidance. It lets you keep more of your money. But let's get back into the evasion.
But this evasion thing, the cost of tax evasion, it is estimated that the collective cost of tax evasion over the last decade amounts to, I hope you're sitting down, $3.09 trillion. $3.09 trillion for the U.S. government and the states.
Oh, okay. That was a significantly higher number than I had heard. So, but I guess the one we'd heard before, the $600-700 billion in IRS tax gap, is the federal only.
Well,
but,
and this is
when
over
when you get into the states as well, it raises it way up.
And plus, this is over a decade.
Oh, okay.
That's over a decade. All right. I've got more figures on what it's costing the U.S. government every year. And of course, every time somebody evades paying their taxes legally, that means the rest of us have to take up the slack. All right?
Which only encourages more evasion. Can you say vicious circle?
No, we're not encouraging anybody to do the evasion here. But anyways, here's another one. This is from fraud.laws.com. And it says, knowing tax evasion statistics. Statistics regarding IRS tax evasion demonstrate the large number of people who attempt to defraud the Internal Revenue Service as well as the federal government. These people are often investigated by field examiners of the IRS in order to collect the taxes and impose evasion charges. Well, yeah, and here's another thing. So you've got all these IRS agents out there that investigate this evasion. So not only does the evasion cost every one of the legal taxpayers, but then we have to pay the IRS people to go after these people.
How big is the IRS's budget? About $12 billion?
Yeah, that's right. And this is part of the reason why.
Oh,
because people that are not, playing the game. Anyways, the effects of the crime may seem localized, but as nations trade and conduct business with each other, the economic standing of one country will in turn affect another. So it's got international consequences to it also. One of the major issues the IRS and the federal government faces in regard to tax evasion and balancing the federal budget is the tax gap. Now, this article has a figure for 2005. In 2005, it was approximately $345 billion that will never be collected. Now, what did Randy say in his interview about the tax gap currently?
Oh, it's $700 billion and is expected to grow over $1 trillion. And there is a study underway now that is supposed to be out in a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
That Americans for Fair Taxation has authorized. And it will be interesting to see what that is. It's about what the evasion rate is going to be and how much money the income tax system is leaving on the table
each year. So look at the progression. In 2005, it was $345 billion.
Yeah, that was 11 years ago.
And then the figure that I saw for 2012 was $600 billion, and the progression for 5 years from now is $1.2 trillion. All right, we'll know better when we get this report from Dr. Sebula. But the evasion problem is getting worse and worse every year, and there's a lot of reasons for it. We're not going to go into that, but the income tax evasion is a horrible problem, and it's not going to get any better by making the income tax a little, more warm and fuzzy. We did that 30 years ago, didn't we, Bob?
Yes, we did, and it didn't work. It devolved back into something that we need to do again, which is why Paul Ryan's plan is appropriately named Better Way, not Best Way.
Yeah.
Because what Paul Ryan is proposing is going to do the same thing that happened in the 80s. You simplify it, and then the lobbyists get a hold of the congressman, and it grows again.
Yeah. Let me continue here. The Internal Revenue Service and other financial analysts for a time believed that the growth of the GDP would help close the tax gap. The belief was that the growth of the GDP plus increased tax collection and evasion charges would close the tax gap in a few brief years. However, as of late, this has proven not to be true. Big surprise.
Yeah.
All right. So
people are people. They want to keep as much of their earned money as they can. They're going to underreport their income. They're going to overreport the deductions and credits that they're entitled to. And Randy made this point too, that the way that the people are going today, fewer and fewer people are working for wages or salaries and getting a W-2. You're getting a lot of folks on eBay stores. You're getting Uber drivers. You're getting a lot of people that are making money, kind of say, off the system, that don't get a W-2, that don't get a 1099. And I would imagine a lot of that income does not get reported. And the federal government is just now waking up to that. And people on both sides of the aisle, excuse me, are beginning to see the problem. So hopefully we can get this fair tax through here quickly.
Oh, yeah. And like Bob said, this is I think Randy used the term the club. This is the club that they're going to use to get the attention of people in Congress, that the evasion is getting out of control. And there's no way to fix it with the current income tax system or any modification to the current income tax system. Americans don't like the income tax. Let's wake up to this fact.
Yeah, because even they're still talking about people filling out a tax return, reporting their income.
Yeah.
And as long as there's a way to underreport what you're making, guess what? Folks are going to do it.
Yeah, and Bob is absolutely right about what Randy's calling the gig economy, all right? People are now making a living by having several different gigs. They're an Uber driver. They're a house sitter. They're a pet sitter. They work
rent out their
part-time
house
here.
through Airbnb. They have an eBay store.
Yeah. And all kinds of stuff.
The list is endless.
Yeah, and that's perfectly okay. I mean, if people want to be entrepreneurial and do that type of thing, that's great. That's what the Constitution allows and so forth. But let's have a tax system that makes it a lot easier for people to actually pay their fair share. Now, one more thing on evasion before I go on to the fraud against taxpayers. This is from bizfilings.com. It was May of 2016. Although they sound similar, tax avoidance and tax evasion are radically different. We've discussed that. Avoidance lowers your tax bill by structuring your transactions so that you reap the largest tax benefit. Tax avoidance is completely legal. Tax evasion, on the other hand, is an attempt to reduce your tax liability by deceit, subterfuge, and concealment. Tax evasion is a crime. And if you get caught, you're going to be, you're not going to like the consequences.
They are going to burn you.
And they go over a couple of ways that people either deliberately or undeliberately are evading taxes. They deliberately underreport their or omitting income, keep two sets of books, making false entries into the books and records and so forth, claiming false or overstated deductions, claiming personal expenses as business expenses. And by the way, I'm not encouraging people to engage in this activity. I'm just reading how people can bring this about.
Sounds like something Sonny would do, don't you think?
And it finishes up with a statement that says, the IRS Criminal Investigation Division is not to be trifled with. Yeah. You think?
Oh, no. I know some folks that have been burned big by the IRS. They get away with it for a while. Yeah. And you think since you got away with it for 2, 3, 4 years that you're never going to get caught, but then you do, and they want it all at once. I mean, can you imagine them coming to you and say, you owe me 10 years of back taxes and you've got 30 days to pay it?
Yeah, and they drop the hammer like that, and it's not pretty. All right, so tax evasion is costing all of the legal taxpayers a lot of money, $600 to $700 billion a year right now, and climbing. Okay, but then there's also fraud against taxpayers. Now, I define that because you've heard of these scams in which taxpayers are defrauded by people pretending to be the IRS, and there's some other ways of doing it too. Mm-hmm. Fraud against taxpayers. There's a lot. If you look online, there's a lot of stuff there that says how to report fraud and how to avoid these scams and so forth.
Yeah, identity theft. People assume your identity and get your refund before you file yours.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah. I personally know somebody that happened to.
This one is about phone scams. This is from the IRS's website, October of 2015. The IRS continues to warn consumers to guard against scam phone calls from thieves intent on stealing their money and their identity. You've probably heard of this before. Scams cost victims over $23 million. That was a couple of years ago. Well, a year and a half ago. $23 million, okay? That's fraud against taxpayers, against individual taxpayers. Now, also, we know of a person who was a victim of fraud. Bob Matthews.
Bob Matthews. He said he spent months and a lot of money getting that straightened out.
Yeah. Do we have time to play that clip?
Yeah, we can do that if you got it.
Yeah, I do.
Okay, let's go for it right here.
Yeah.
Now, you know there are plenty of problems with the tax code. Besides the time, the effort, and the cost it takes to go ahead and comply with that for small businesses to deal with. Now, one other problem is that it is incredibly error-prone. It is incredibly fraud-prone. I mean, identity thieves have a field day, impersonating other people and getting their tax refunds. I hear you've had a little personal experience with that.
Yes, my personal tax return. I'm just checking the end of the month, I look and see what went into the bank and what came out of the bank, and I'm noticing my Social Security's down about $175 this month. So I didn't think much. I thought maybe it was a Medicare charge or I was overpaid at some time. I wasn't really too worried. And the next month, I'm down under $175, exact same amount. And the next month, the third month, I got on the phone, tried to call the IRS. Well, you know how that goes. They got a phone tree there that goes to Nome, Alaska. There is no way in heck you can catch anybody.
Amen.
So I finally broke down and I went to the Social Security office in town. I got an appointment and I went in there and I sat down. It still took me 2.5 hours to wait to see him. I will say that the woman I met was very nice. She was delightful once I got in there. And she came through and she said, well, this is what you're getting and this is your gross Social Security. And I said, well, what's this 175? And she said, well, let me look that up. I don't recognize the code. So she comes back and says, well, that's a tax withholding from the IRS. I said, a tax withholding? She says, yes, they can take 15% of your Social Security if you owe them taxes. I said, well, ma'am, I don't owe them any taxes. She says, take it up with them. Uh-oh. So we went the next day to the IRS office. Well, you cannot make an appointment. It's first come, first served. The man said, get here early in the morning before we open. And I was there along with 6 or 8 other people. And there were 3 folks in there. And again, we sat for a few hours. I went in. Initially, the individual was slightly hostile. You owe the money. Can you make a deal? Can you pay us it? I said, what do I owe? And he says, well, we sent you letters. You know what it is. I said, I haven't seen any letters. He says, you have a tax liability here, and he showed it to me. It was about $26,000.
Wow.
And as I mentioned before, because of that commodity thing. And I said, well, you're not sending me any letters on this. I haven't seen a thing. So he pulls up copies of the letters, and I look at them, and there it is, Robert A. Matthews, Jr., my Social Security number, and an address in Roanoke, North Carolina. I said, wow. Sir, I bought gas in Roanoke, but I've never lived there. I don't have a place of business or anything in North Carolina. And he says, well, that's where we've been sending it. And it came to find out after about 6 weeks back and forth that somebody had got a hold of my 2010 tax return before the IRS or at the IRS. I don't know where.
And that's supposed to be confidential.
They got the physical return. They just didn't get the information. It didn't end up at the IRS. Then they submitted their own with a Roanoke address and tried to get money back. And that's when they found out that I, quote, owed this $26,000. So they stopped it. But in the meantime, the IRS took the Roanoke address and was sending all the information to them. We still haven't straightened it out. And that's been, I was back in before October, late September when I worked with them. So we're 6 months out.
Wow. That's quite a story.
Yes. And you have no idea that it's happening. I mean, I was in total blindness for 3 or 4 months.
Okay, you really jogged an old man's memory with that one. Now that you bring it back up, I do remember talking to him about that, and it was just amazing, the trouble that these criminals, and that's what they are, made for Bob. Oh. And that's going on all over the country, happening to all kinds of people because the system allows it.
Yeah, that's right. It's an impossible system, and it's impossible to protect too. So that's why a lot of people get subjected to this kind of treatment. So I wanted people to hear that, because when you hear it from somebody from their own experience, it makes it more real. This is not just something we're reading about in the newspaper. This happens to people. And Bob, you knew somebody that was scammed in some way.
I do. I know a lady I used to go to church with. Very modest means, very modest Social Security pension. Lives in an old rundown trailer. Does not have a lot of money at all. She got her identity stolen and her measly little refund check taken. So you don't have to be Donald Trump. Don't have a Donald Trump-sized bank account to be the target of this thing.
Yeah, this is terrible. I mean, that lady doesn't deserve that. Bob Matthews.
No, it took her months and months to get it straightened out.
Oh, yeah. That's the other thing. Yeah, how to recover from something like this and restore your credit. It's incredible. And Bob Matthews is a decorated Vietnam vet. I mean, highly decorated. Okay, somebody like that doesn't. Well, nobody deserves this.
Nobody deserves that.
Yeah, but
and
anyways,
the system that allows it needs to be jerked out by the roots.
Oh, jeez. Just one more reason. All right, that's why I wanted to play that, because I remember that from the interview with Bob a couple of years ago, and it really is pertinent to what we're talking about now. Now, let me get back to my research. Fraud against taxpayers. All right. Tax refund fraud is expected to, this is from NBCnews.com, and it's dated, it's almost 2 years ago, February 2015. Tax fraud is expected to soar again this tax season, hitting a whopping $21 billion by 2016.
Wow.
All right, up from just $6.5 billion 2 years ago. So evasion is escalating, and now fraud against taxpayers.
And you could mail hundreds of refunds to the same address and the IRS doesn't catch on.
Yeah, how do they do that?
I'm laughing, but that's not funny.
Yeah. And the problem with which the agency admits is growing is compounded by an outdated fraud detection system that has trouble identifying many attempts to trick it. Now, I've highlighted a couple of important sentences here. One of the main reasons for the rapid growth is that it takes so little time to file a false return. All you need is the name, the date of birth, and the Social Security number. That's all you need to get. Somebody's name, date of birth, and Social Security number, and you can file a tax return, and the real person, doesn't find out until they file their tax return, and the IRS says, oh, you already filed a return. Yeah, and then you go round and round. And they're often unable to follow up on the red flags that the system throws up until after the refund check has been cut and sent. So the damage is already done before the IRS finds out about it. That's their archaic system. Here's a conspicuous flaw in the system as currently set up. To file a tax return electronically, all someone needs, as I said, is the name, date of birth, and Social Security number. The IRS accepts the tax filing as soon as January 1st, but employers aren't required to submit correct employment information to the agency until March, by which time roughly half of all the refunds have been sent out. By law, the tax refund system, as it is currently constituted, amounts to a pay first and ask questions later system. And then the last thing here, in other words, an imaginative crook in possession of three basic pieces of information of a person's identity could make up a fake W-2 information, submit it, get the money within 30 days, in the amount of time that the law says that the agency must refund tax filers. So, and I'm not going to dump on the employees of the IRS, because they have an impossible job. They have an impossible situation, an impossible tax code, and they have an impossible job ahead of them.
Okay, we've got about 5 minutes left here, and you've got something that the IRS wants to do.
Oh, and I just found out about this today before I came to the studio, all right? The Internal Revenue Service announced December 1st of last year, 2016, sorry. This is from a website called taxrevolution.us, and it's dated 2015 of 2016. Let me correct that. It's dated December 15th of last year, 2016.
Okay,
now I got that straight. The IRS announced December 1st the launch of a new online tool that will allow taxpayers to view and pay their account balances on NICE. Isn't that nice, Bob?
Oh,
They're making
yes.
it so easy for us.
Mm-hmm.
All right?
Just like withholding.
Before using the tool, taxpayers must authenticate their identities through a secure access portal. This is a two-step authorization, and they go on to talk about how you do that. This comes after the news of the IRS employees jeopardizing sensitive taxpayer information. According to a report released by the Treasury Inspector General for Tax Administration, IRS employees sent hundreds of unencrypted emails containing personal taxpayer information. Where have we heard this type of thing before? Using personal emails for business type stuff?
Oh, yeah.
Some employees even use personal email accounts for conducting official agency business. The TIGTA's startling report begs the question, if almost half of the IRS employees have a history of exposing taxpayer information and don't even follow the laws put in place by their own agency to prevent that from happening, then why should Americans trust the IRS with collecting their sensitive information with a new internet-based tool?
I don't.
It defies logic.
I do not trust the IRS to keep my stuff
and that's
secure.
wise. So it's, and how are we going to make this better? We're not. The only way we're going to make it better is by getting rid of this crazy system. The income tax is impossible. And as America grows in population and the tax code grows in complexity, it gets worse. I mean, there's more evasion, more fraud.
Well, I am glad that the evasion part especially is finally getting attention in Congress.
Yeah, that's good.
Again, if you're a FAIRtax volunteer and you want to know what you can do, beat on your congressmen and your senators and keep bringing this evasion up to, hey, look, the system you've got now is leaving billions of dollars on the table. And if you want that money to spend, get rid of the income tax, put in the FAIRtax, problem solved.
And folks, we can't do this alone. We need the listeners to, as Bob says, the most effective tool is calls to your representative and your two senators. Phone calls have an effect. And if they get a lot of phone calls from people on the same subject, that really gets their attention. So please take some time to call your representative, get involved, because this is affecting all of us in a terrible, terrible, expensive way.
And again, we've got a new Congress. The FAIRtax has been reintroduced, again, as H.R. 25 in the House, S18 in the Senate this time around. And if you've been on to PopVox expressing your support for the FAIRtax earlier, you need to do that again because everything resets with the new Congress.
Yep. It's 115th Congress, like Bob says. It's all brand new again. All the old legislation that didn't get passed is gone. They're starting all over again, so that means you have to start all over again on PopVox.
Yeah, and as Randy said, we're going to get some action on it this year.
Yeah.
It's been sitting on the shelf every year since 1999 and dying at the end of the session. This year, we're going to get something done on tax reform, and we, the FAIRtax supporters of the world, need to make sure that the FAIRtax is in the mix, because, I mean, once it's in the mix, Ron, I don't see any way in the world it loses the debate.
No, that's true. If it gets a fair hearing, the FAIRtax will win the day. But remember, it's Congress. Congress does what's best for them. They don't necessarily do what's best for us. So, all right. PopVox, greatagain.gov. Don't forget, go greatagain.gov. That way you can tell the Trump transition team, this is what I want done. Hopefully you'll tell them about the FAIRtax.
And he's surrounded with FAIRtax people. So
Yeah,
if he
that's
hears
right.
it from them and hears it from the we the people, the constituents again, that can only be a good thing.
And don't forget our webinar at the end of the month. It's the fourth Thursday. Go to fairtax.org/webinar. fairtax.org/webinar. If you know of somebody who's not familiar with the FAIRtax and they can devote an hour to it, this is a very simple and, again, free way for them to learn about the FAIRtax. So encourage them to get into it.
And again, we encourage you to interact with the program here, thefairtaxguys@gmail.com. Like us on our Facebook page. Keep an eye out for our Facebook Live. We don't have an exact date yet. That will be sometime in early February.
Yeah.
And so participate in that. That was fun.
Yeah, it was. That was a good event. I like the interactivity.
Yeah, but that's going to be it for this edition of FAIRtax Power Radio. Thank you so much for listening. I'm Bob Paxton.
And I'm Ron Malero.
Reminding you that the FAIRtax is America's big solution, and once you understand it,
you'll demand it.
FAIRtax is coming.